And we have a phenomenal afternoon planned for you now. And please give a very warm welcome to Sheryl Sandberg, the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook. Welcome, Sheryl. Great to see you. Please join me up on stage. All right. Now, Sheryl, do you have any protests planned during this? Because I'd really like to know ahead of time.
I don't. Anyone protesting?
Okay.
Stand up now.
Oh, yeah.
All right, good.
They got the tips on how to do that yesterday, so I expect a more advanced version of it, hopefully, today. Sheryl, first of all, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And how about a big hand for Sheryl, huh? This is great. And, I thought about all the great people I wanted to have here at Dreamforce, and this is not your first Dreamforce. You were here a couple of times before. You've always supported us. You've always given us your time and always given us your insight, so thank you very much for all of that. We really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for having me, and also Salesforce has been a great partner to Facebook, and you've been a great friend, so I'm excited to be here.
What my goal of this interview is for everyone in this room and online to understand, like I do, that you're truly one of the great leaders of our industry and also just one of the great people. And I just want to kind of open up so we can give them, a snapshot of your personality so they can experience that tremendous warmth that I receive every time that I have an opportunity to interact with you. I have even had a chance to speak to incredible people who've worked with you in the past, including I had an amazing conversation this summer with Larry Summers. And I mean, it's amazing that it goes back into, I think you were 18 or 19 years old when you met him, and then you would go on and work with him in government, and then he helped kind of bridge you into the technology industry. And here you are now as the COO of Facebook, and it's so exciting. And when I talked to him, he was so proud of you, and he always knew that you were going to have this incredible success. And when he saw it get created, it just, warmed his own heart. Tell me, did you always have that feeling? Did you always knew that you were going to be one of the most successful women in the world?
No, of course not. I just finished writing an entire book telling women that they should be more self-confident, telling men and women that we all should stop underestimating women. Thank you. And I wrote this because no matter what progress women have made, we're still really far from getting our share of leadership roles in any industry, in any country, anywhere in the world. And that means that when the decisions are made that most impact our world, our voices aren't equally heard. And so I wrote Lean In to try to tell women to sit at any table, reach for any opportunity, and I still find that this is a challenge for me. So earlier this year, when my book was long turned in, years of research done, again, telling women to be more self-confident, we had a meeting at Facebook. And it was to start a project that I wanted to do for years, but Marc and others didn't want to do. And there's a guy named Jay Parikh, one of our technical leaders. He and I wanted to do the project. No one agreed. And then after years, everyone decided we're going to do it. So we have this launch meeting. And I start off, being myself. I'm so grateful to be here. All these years, I wanted to do this project. No one agreed with me. I just feel so much better. Jay looks up. I knew Sheryl and I were right and you'd all come around. So I'm Facebook messaging with Jay later that night. Hey, Jay, can I use that story on my book tour? Sure. Jay, can I use your name in that story on my book tour? Absolutely. He's a really sweet guy. So I said, Jay, don't worry. I'm not going to make you look egotistical. I'm not worried about that. In a million years.
Men are not egotistical. That's the most important thing you need to know.
And I am not claiming
we all have our
they
egos
are.
in check.
But despite having written the book, despite whatever success I've had or I don't have, I sit here not having the self-confidence that Jay has. And I sit here knowing that and trying to be open about it so that we can understand these gender differences and make it better for women.
you think that comes from? Where is that born out of? Where is that? What is the source of that insecurity that you're articulating?
Yeah. It's stereotypes and it's culture. And what's striking now, having been all over the world talking to women about Lean In, is that cultures are so different within our country, within the world, China, Korea, France, the United States, except for one thing. Our stereotypes of men and women are actually exactly the same. Everywhere in the world, we believe men should be assertive, aggressive leaders. Everywhere in the world, we believe women should speak when spoken to, raise their hand, give to others. I'm going to ask people a question. I think I can see people. If you're a man in this audience, please raise your hand. Can we get some light so I can see? Please raise your hand. No, don't raise your hand yet. Sorry. That's why I need lights.
Hey, that's actually right there. Isn't that actually a huge observation, right? Aren't
right there.
Always right.
Right.
They talk about that in schools.
A man in the audience, please raise your hand if you were called bossy as a child. Bossy. If you are a woman in this audience, please raise your hand if you were called bossy as a child. Okay, we're not children anymore, we've grown up. If you're a man in this audience, please raise your hand if you've been told that you are too aggressive at work. There's always a few. If you are a woman in this audience, please raise your hand if you have been told you're too aggressive at work. I really want everyone to take a minute and look at that result. When a boy leads, we don't call him bossy because we expect him to lead, but when a little girl leads on a playground, we call her bossy. We start communicating to little girls that they shouldn't lead. And when they grow up, we tell those women they're too aggressive, and we tell very few men. The good news, and this is why I wrote Lean In, is we can change this today. Every single person in this audience can change this today, and here's how. There's a man who works for me at Facebook, and this is not a joke. He started the conversation with me by saying, "I haven't read your book," which is curious. I mean, if you worked for me, would you start the conversation? But let's leave that aside. He said, "But I have been listening to some, not all of the things you've said all these years." So we did our 360 feedback. No, that is what he said. Facebook's an interesting place to be a manager. And we did 360 feedback, and he got feedback that a woman who worked for him was too aggressive. So rather than write too aggressive in her performance review, which has happened to almost every woman in this audience, they all raised their hands, he went back and asked the people, men and women who gave that feedback, "Can I ask you, what did she do that was too aggressive? In the specific, what did she do?" And they answered the question. And then he said, "If a man had done exactly those same things, would you have thought he was too aggressive?" And to a person, they said no. So the next time in your office someone says a woman is too aggressive, too assertive, political, brusque, take a deep breath and ask some questions. And the next time you hear a little girl called bossy, walk up to the person who did it, who might be that girl's parents, have a big smile on your face and say, "Your little girl's not bossy. Your little girl has executive leadership skills."
Well, it's an awesome story, and I have to tell you, I did read your book. And I had an amazing experience after I read it, because I was in a one-on-one with one of my executives who started to lament to me that one of our female executives at Salesforce was being too aggressive. And never in my career had either I had the consciousness around that or the awareness around that, and I just was able to take a breath, to sit back and go, wow, this is actually unfolding exactly as Sheryl has provided the enlightenment around it. And it's a true story, and I sat there and I'm like, but what am I supposed to do now? You know? And I mean, what I did was I said, I'm thrilled that she's being aggressive. I want everyone in this company to be aggressive. She's a phenomenal executive and a phenomenal leader, and we want to have her to do more of that. Okay, now, is that the right thing?
That's awesome. A round of applause for Marc. Yes.
But I just want to say to you, you talk about insecurity, and by the way, just as a point of enlightenment for you, women are not the only ones who are insecure.
That's right.
There's another group as well. We won't identify who they are at this point. And But I wasn't sure what to do. I was
Right.
not, in business school. I didn't go to business school, but I did I had undergraduate kind of pseudo business degree, and I'm hanging in there with it, but
It's holding you back.
let me tell you, the funny thing is I didn't completely know what to do.
That's right.
I did not. I read the book, and I'm like, okay, I know. I need to just like take a stance here and say, it's a phenomenal executive. We want aggressive executives, and you're right. I never had anyone say that about a man in the company. So what should here I am, the quote unquote CEO, having a one-on-one with one of my subordinates, what am I supposed to do?
So I think what you did was handle it correctly, because if we call it what it is, we can educate and change people. That gender bias is something that happens to everyone. Saying in that situation, wait a second, I've never had someone tell me one of my direct reports who's a man was too aggressive. We're all biased, myself included. That feedback is very specific to women. Let's get specific. What did she do? What's happening with gender is exactly what you say. Here's what we know. We know that there's been no progress for women in corporate America for 10 years. We know there's been no progress closing the wage gap for 10 years. Women make 77 cents to the dollar, men do. And how do we handle this? We never talk about it. Shh. So most of my career, until literally 5 years ago, I never said the word woman in the workplace because I was afraid people would notice I was a woman. And more seriously, you never say the word woman because you feel like the person on the other side of the table is going to think you're whining or asking for special treatment or about to sue them. For men, it's even worse. You're terrified to say the word woman. You're afraid you're going to get sued, attacked, complained about. And we are solving no problems with that. So what Lean In is trying to do is get CEOs like you to recognize gender and talk about it. Along with the book, started a foundation. Our foundation is working with Salesforce and over 300 other partners and individuals to start Lean In Circles. So Lean In Circles are groups of 10-ish people, they can be men, they can be women, who come together to talk about these issues and support each other to reach for their ambitions. There's a lot of evidence that says that peer mentoring is incredibly important. So right before this meeting, I met with a group of women and one man who are running the Lean In Circles at Salesforce. There are 33 up and running. You have over 450 people in them globally. And what I heard from them was that those circles were empowering them to lean into their careers. There are women who said they felt they were more confident as leaders. And there was a great story of one of the men, his name is Pablo, he's here, where he had a moment where he wasn't leaning in because he felt insecure about something he got the opportunity to do. And his wife said, wait a second, you're in a Lean In circle, lean in. And he leaned in and succeeded. And so if as a CEO you are willing to talk about this and address gender head on and say, hey, this is an issue that occurs to women, it's a great competitive advantage. There's a huge competition for results and for employees. If you're the most junior level employee or you're the most senior level, big executive like you, and you can work better with 50% of the population, you're gonna outperform. There's a session tomorrow morning at the Palace Hotel here, part of Dreamforce at 9 a.m. on Lean In Circles. Everyone should go. Women should go because it'll help your career, but men here should go because it'll help their careers. If you're a man and you go to this, you will go home to your company and just drop it into conversation. When I was at the Dreamforce session on Lean In Circles, learning how to support women, what will happen is women will want to work with you, and women will start talking to you more openly, and you'll be a better colleague and manager. If you happen to be a single man interested in dating women, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. People ask me all the time, which men should I date? I'm like, the ones who show up for events like this. This is huge.
Okay, well, we're not going to go there, but let's...
Why not?
Because I have more coaching that I need from you. I've been waiting to have this conversation.
In this very intimate setting.
Well, it is an intimate setting because, whenever we're here, we're talking one-on-one, and, I have this challenge, and the challenge that I have is I want to have more women leaders at Salesforce. I want to have more balance between my men and women leaders at Salesforce. I think there is incredible benefit to having diversity at Salesforce.
Yeah.
It's completely selfish because I know it's going to create a better company, okay? Which will reflect on me, of course. But, okay, but let me tell you that what are the things that I'm doing? I'm going to tell you some of the things I'm doing. Tell me which are the things I'm doing that are right, which of the things are wrong. Of course, we have a tremendous, female advocacy group at Salesforce called FemForce.
They're awesome.
Heard of it? Awesome. And we also have all these great lean-in circles. Okay, but to use a military term, because that's, how I am, I created, this kind of term where I'm like, we need to have like a women's surge at Salesforce. We need to see the rising of all of our women leaders at Salesforce. And when we do events and when we do programs, when we do leadership development, we need to invite and include as many women as possible and dig deep into the organization.
That's right.
And look everywhere and bring them up so that when we are doing, for example, a management meeting, okay, where we might only be inviting our top 10 managers, and then it's kind of self-selecting, we're going to stay the same. I'm like, can we bring in more great women leaders? Is that the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Is that what I should be doing, or
Yes.
are there other things that I should be doing?
You should be doing that. You should be doing the lean-in programs, and there are more things you can do. So we need to surface the things no one talks about. So let's talk about mentorship and sponsorship. Hugely important to have them. People who have them do better. We know that we all like to mentor and sponsor people who are like us. So since largely men are in power, that means largely men. Everyone knows that, everyone talks about it. But here's what no one talks about. What does a man and a man in a room alone look like? A meeting. What does a man and a man at a bar at a hotel on a work trip look like? Mentoring. What does a man and a woman alone in a room look like? Or at a bar at a hotel? What does an older man and a younger woman look like? Whenever I'm in DC, the audiences yell out, DC! It's true, every time.
Does that branch off into another story at this point?
No, I can't
okay.
help but notice, because no one else does it. I'm always kind of waiting for someone to yell DC, but we're not in DC. But here's what no one talks about. 64% of managers in the United States are afraid to be alone in a room with a woman. I went to a big financial institution in New York, and I talked about how we mentor and sponsor, and this very senior man, he said, look, I want to help women, but I want to be clear what happens in my company. When I give a performance review to a man, I talk to him. When I give a performance review to a woman, HR reads it 3 times and I stick to the script. Who do you think's getting good advice? We need to make it a badge of honor for men and women to be alone in a room, and everyone needs to be appropriate. But there is no mentoring that happens in a large group. You have to be able to have alone conversations. We need to make it a badge of honor for the people in power who are largely men to mentor and sponsor young women, and it's a huge issue. Here's another issue. We know that we lose a lot of our high-performing women either to the careers they could have had or to the workforce altogether during the child-rearing years. What do we do about that? Nothing. When do we mention it? Never, ever. Raise your hand if you've called someone in your office and said, you may want to have kids one day, I'd love to talk to you about it. Don't be shy. Yeah, I've never gotten a hand. You got 2. So we know this is when we lose women, but we've convinced ourselves that it's illegal to talk about it. The Lean In Foundation, we worked with SCAT and ARPS, they published a brief, it's up on our site. Let's be clear, it's not illegal to talk about pregnancy. It's illegal to discriminate against people on pregnancy, and by not talking about it, we get nowhere. My brother, who did read my book, called me during my book tour and said he was interviewing a woman, he's a surgeon in Houston, to join his team, and he said to her, she doesn't even have an offer yet, you may want to work on my team, and you may want to have kids one day. Shock and awe, no one says that. And that's your business, you don't have to talk to me about it. But I thought about this, and I have 2 sisters and a wife, I'm one of them, and they struggled through this. They didn't want anyone to know they were pregnant, they didn't want anyone to find out they were pregnant, they were worried they'd lose the good sales teams or the good cases. So if you come to work here, I want you to know my door is open. Come talk to me anytime. If you want to have children, I'm not going to give the good surgeries to someone else because you're pregnant, and I'm going to help you take a leave and come back if that's what you want to do. That conversation is not just illegal, but it is best practices. Any manager, man or woman who has that conversation, you just got an employee's loyalty for life, and that woman is so much more likely to come to your company, to stay at your company, and to come back. That's what we need to do. We need to surface these issues and talk about them.
You know, in my example, I told you that, I thought we should do this kind of surge. And then I got an email from one of the women that we invited to our very top leadership program. And it's a meeting that I conduct 4 times a year with our top, between 75 and 100 executives. And she lamented in the email, she said, I really don't want to come because my boss was not invited, and I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And again,
hard stuff.
Well, I don't know what to do. So what should I say at that point? And how do I have this goal, that you're helping to motivate and you're giving me confidence that I can achieve it. But what am I supposed to do at that point? What is the right thing to respect how she's feeling, and also to respect my need, which is to create this greater diversity in my team?
Every time we raise gender, and every time we do anything on behalf of gender, the threat is that we're creating an unlevel playing field. Is it fair to her boss that she gets to come to your senior management meeting and he doesn't? And people have very different reactions. So I get asked to be on corporate boards, and I can't join any more boards, so I say no. And 100% of the time, the person on the other end of the phone, usually the CEO, the next sentence is, "We're looking for women, can you help find someone?" Now, I take that really well, because I think boards need more women. I'm fine if, I think the only way they get there is by being assertive about it and explicit. Half of my friends who get those calls are insulted. When the phone hangs up, they're like, oh, they only wanted me because they're a woman. I think the way to handle that is we say, look, because we know the playing field is uneven for women, I have to make an extra effort to level the playing field. There is bias and discrimination against women all the way up, and you are right. In this particular instance, I'm giving you an extra advantage. In this particular instance, we're looking for a woman for our board, but that's because we're trying to undo all the systematic bias. And the systematic bias, once you understand it, is pretty pervasive. Here's what we know. When a man and a woman performs at the same level, all of us, including the person themselves, overestimate the man's performance and we underestimate the woman's. We get the man slightly high and we get the woman slightly low. This starts with infants. Mothers systematically overestimate their sons crawling and underestimate their daughters. In classes all over the country, we systematically call on more boys than girls. And when boys interrupt, we let them interrupt. And so part of what you're trying to do is you're saying, look, I don't have a huge affirmative action program. I'm not promoting her over you. I'm not promoting you over your boss, but I'm trying to correct for some of the biases out there, and I'm giving women extra exposure. We know that men get promoted on potential and women get promoted on what they've already accomplished. And we know that men will reach for opportunities when they meet some of the criteria and women when they meet all of the criteria. So some of these interventions, like inviting more women to the meeting, when they're framed as trying to get to a more level playing field, I think they go down better.
I think that's a phenomenal insight, and it's kind of getting back to the beginning of this dialogue. You said, well, if you're a man, put your hand up, and then before you had the opportunity to go on, there must have been about a third of the men who had their hands up. And research shows us over and over again, especially kids in K-8, that boys are going to put their hands up and try to answer questions, even if they don't know the answer to the question, number one. Uh-huh. And it kind of adds to kind of the disruptive nature of young boys in classrooms in K-8. It's certainly some of the research that kind of points to that, there's a role for all girls schools. Is this pointing in that direction? Do you believe in that? Do you think that's the right thing? Should we have, girls K-8 in their own schools, or can co-ed education work?
Well, co-ed education has to work, because the majority of our kids are in the public schools. My kids are in the public schools. The thing about bias is if we recognize it, we can change it, but we have to realize how hard it is. So a friend of a friend is a teacher who read my book, and he thought to himself, the data shows that he's an elementary school teacher. I'm calling on more boys than girls, but I'm really not, but I'll double down. I'll call on a lot of girls. So now he's calling on more girls, he thinks. And then he said, well, maybe I should get myself audited. So he invited a friend to watch his class. So now he's making a conscious effort to call on more girls, and he's got a friend sitting there checking it off. He expected it to be blown away more girls than boys. Do you know what the numbers were? 70-30 boys. Now, that teacher, that shows you two things. it shows you how hard it is to overcorrect these biases. But that guy's going to do it because he just got himself audited, and he's going to bring a friend back a month later to see if he can do it. And so again, the nice thing about all of these stereotypes is that we can change them so quickly. You can change the word aggressive, how it's used in your workforce today. We can change how many boys and girls we call on today. And that's part of what I've been really excited about since the book came out. It's not just the book, but the change we see in people's lives. The CEOs who complain to me, and this happens a lot, to be fair and honest, Marc is not one of them, who say to me, you are costing me so much money because all the women in my company want to be paid as much as all the men. To them I say, I'm not sorry at all. That's fantastic.
What have been the other surprises that have happened now that the book has been published? I mean, certainly one surprise has to be that it went to #1 and New York Times. I mean, so fast, and the huge amount of publicity has been phenomenal. Have there been other surprises for you? You've had so many interactions around it.
Yeah, a lot of surprises. Just a few months ago, I was in Minneapolis, and I got to go to a lean-in circle on an Air Force base. So these are women who are officers in the Air Force with officers in the Navy, and they brought their daughters, and they're in uniform, and I met with them. And boy, if it's hard to be a woman in a U.S. corporation, is it hard to be a woman in the U.S. military? These are women who are risking their lives. Yeah, I mean, these women are risking their lives doing the same job standing next to these men. And while the military actually pays them the same for the same level, which is good, they don't get the same respect. They are subtly and not so subtly harassed. The B word is a big issue in their lives, and I don't mean the word bossy. And it is really hard. But they've come together, they've formed a lean-in circle, both on their base, and now they have a virtual one, which has expanded all over the country. And they said it's making a huge difference because for the first time they've come together as a group. Rather than being the only woman in the group they're in, they meet together once a month, and they're supporting each other, and they think it's making a huge difference. And when I think about having even the smallest impact on making their lives easier, that's incredibly gratifying because boy, do those women deserve it.
Well, that's a phenomenal story. And what other surprises have there been since the book has been published?
Lots. I mean, a lot of men.
Are you surprised at the amount of attention?
A run on laundry.
What about the attention? Are you surprised with the attention that it received, or did you expect it? Or like, you have your communications team with you. One of your leaders of communications is someone we've worked with since we started our company. Did they all come to you and say, "Oh, this is going to be unbelievable. Get ready"? Or did you go, "Wow, everyone wants to know about this"?
No, I wrote a hardcover nonfiction book on feminism, so. Those don't usually fly off the shelves. It's going to be its own category now, hardcover nonfiction on feminism. There's going to be a whole category. But actually, no, look, I've been very surprised, but I feel really gratified that the conversation has happened because we need conversation, we need debate, because unless we do, this doesn't change. The other thing that's been really surprising has been the run on laundry detergent I've caused in the country.
How so? Can you tell us about that?
I'm glad you asked.
Well, it wasn't the first thing on my mind. Well, now that you brought it up, I was just thinking about that.
But you asked for surprises. The run on laundry detergent. So
yes.
The data shows that when men are more active partners in their marriages, their wives are happier. Happier couples have more sex. So I've been telling men all over the country and the world, if you want to have more sex with your wife, don't buy flowers, do laundry. And this works. Apparently, there are men wandering around supermarkets. Where's the laundry detergent? A friend of mine told me that she asked her husband to do a load of laundry, and he had seen me interviewed, so he kind of picked up the basket, he turned around, and he said, "Is this Sheryl Sandberg laundry? Is this foreplay? Because if this is foreplay, I'm in. But if this is just laundry, there's a game on."
Okay, well, we're not going to go there.
Marc's going to run out of here and go home and do some laundry.
Yes, I am.
Right after y'all attend
know?
the Lean In Circle session tomorrow, y'all should go home and do laundry too. This is proven stuff.
Okay, Sheryl. Thank you for that, Sheryl. I almost want to just wrap it up right now and but I'm not going to. So we've talked about a lot of, I just want to stay with the book for just a second more.
It's getting interesting, huh?
It's getting better. It's getting better. More surprises?
Look,
The surprises section turns out to be the best section here.
So look, there are a lot of surprises. One of the things my foundation did is we asked women the question that I was asked that led me to write this book, which is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Mark Zuckerberg asked me that question. He asked everyone at Facebook that question. We have these posters on the wall. And what I would do if I wasn't afraid is speak out as a woman. And I was told it would change or end my business career, that you could not be a serious business exec with a serious job and speak out on women. Men write books all the time when they're in business, but this was different. I was writing a business book about women, and I would never survive. And I'm glad I did it because it was true to myself, and I think it mattered. And so we've gone out and we've asked people, what would you do if you weren't afraid? We've asked people to take pictures and post them on Tumblr and Facebook and everywhere. And there was one I loved. There was a 16-year-old girl who wrote that she's afraid all the time. She realizes she's afraid a lot. And she realizes she can't conquer every fear in the moment. So she's created a little fear notebook for herself. She carries it around. And every time she's afraid, she writes the thing down. And if she can't get herself to do it right then, she's going to spend the rest of her life and she's going to check off that list. That 16-year-old girl has inspired girls and boys around the country. She wrote her story. We've had an amazing reaction. Another one I really loved is a 28-year-old named Sarah read my book, and she asked herself what she would do if she wasn't afraid, and she decided she'd run for mayor. She ran. She now became the youngest and the first female mayor of Pleasant Hill, Iowa, just a few weeks ago.
It's awesome.
28 years old.
Well, you've now brought that up now twice, and it sounds like that's the title of your next book. What would you do if you were not afraid? And you also mentioned at the beginning of the interview that you think a lot of women are not pursuing their dreams because they are insecure, which is also fear. So, again, is that fear coming out of society and culture? I mean, this is now, you're getting quite specific about what this is. This isn't just some kind of cultural norm. This isn't just some kind of built-in stereotype. This is now, you're really starting to make a pretty dominant case that it's something much bigger, that there's too much fear inside women. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Too much fear inside women, too much gender bias and discrimination in all of us, and vastly different expectations for men and women. So women are always asked, how do you do it all? Men are never asked that, ever. I'm asked that in every interview I do. Men are never asked that. Now, why are men not asked that? Because we assume, what we mean is all means career and family, and every man assumes and can have both, and every woman thinks she can. Which is stupid because 70% of mothers in this country work. Most work full-time because they have to. So we have this messaging of you can't do it all, but you have to do it all to make ends meet for your family. The messages we send to men and women are so vastly different. Think of a career as a marathon. Men and women get to the start of the starting line equally fit and trained, right? The gun goes off. What voices do the men hear as they're running? The men hear, you've got this, keep going, good start. What do the women hear? From the day they enter the workforce, women hear voices which are saying, are you sure you want to start a marathon you might not finish? Don't you want kids one day? Does it make sense to do this? The race goes on, the voices get louder. The voices get louder for the men. You've got this. You've got almost the finish line's right there. The voices get louder for the women. Should you be at work when your kid needs you at home? Again, men in the audience, raise your hand if anyone's ever asked you, should you be working? Go ahead. Should you be working? Women in the audience, raise your hand if anyone's ever asked you, should you be working? That needs to change because we need our partners to be equal partners. I tell women who are dating women, you're in great shape because those partnerships work really well. They split chores evenly, they both do equal housework and childcare. But in the United States today, a married couple who both work full-time, the woman does 30% more housework and 40% more childcare than her husband, which means she has 2 jobs and a man has 1. And my message to families is we should change this not just for equality's sake, but because it's good for children. At any income level, no matter how active a mother is, Children with more active fathers are better adjusted, do better in school, have better careers, vastly better outcomes. And one of the reasons I want men to read my book, and I've been so glad so many men have, is men need to learn that, because the payoff for being a more active father is not just for society, it's for their children.
Well, it's outstanding coaching, and it's your coaching society. You're coaching different points. In some ways, you're saying there's too much fear. You say there's too much insecurity, and
not enough help.
Not enough help.
Too much discrimination.
Too much discrimination.
Too much bias.
Too much bias, and also expectation setting around this is what is expected of you.
That's right.
Are these two things now is this the yin and yang of the problem?
Yes, and that's why we can change it. Because stereotypes are tremendously reinforcing. 2 stories, one here and one in Germany. One of the reasons I wrote Lean In is I brought home with my husband, Dave, who you know, a tape of all the US presidents for President's Day when my daughter was 4. And she listened to the tape and she looked up and said, "Mommy, why are they all boys?" And I have a friend in Germany, she has a 5-year-old son. Last year, he said to her, "Well, I can't be chancellor, I'm not a girl." All this takes is more women in leadership roles. If we see more women lead, we will start to expect leadership and we will stop telling women they're too aggressive. If we let more little girls lead, if we get rid of the word bossy, we will stop discouraging it. If more people see women in all of these positions of power, including at your conferences, where I think you're doing a wonderful thing to invite more women there, they will start to expect women to be there.
Well, I want to ask you now that you've brought this up, do you think women are leading differently once they get into these positions of power? You mentioned Angela Merkel, and I think that we can point to we're in a world today that needs to rethink its environment, needs to rethink energy, and you've probably noticed recently that German energy stocks are really taking it on the chin because you have this phenomenal chancellor in power there who has shifted the balance of power, metaphorically, from kind of traditional fossil fuels to more alternative energy than ever before. She was willing to, use your words, lean in and kind of go against the status quo and say we want more wind, we want more solar, we want more biofuels, we want all these things because our environment is at risk. Is it the women who are going to create the future of the world? Are women what we need to create a better environment? Are women what we need to kind of transform from this really dark place that the world is heading to a more light place?
I believe that if we had more women at the tables where decisions were made, we'd make better decisions. And there's a lot of data to prove that. Companies with more women in senior management roles have better outcomes. Sometimes people push back and say, would the world be more peaceful? I don't think so. My answer is let's try it. It's not going to get any worse. But I think we actually just saw that with the budget crisis. Huge budget crisis, ridiculous on all sides, terrible for our economy, terrible for our country. And who brought it together? The women of the Senate. What would happen if these bodies were half women? I say let's find out.
Well, do you think that one of these key points, if at some point in the future there's a female president of the United States, will that be like a milestone event for the world?
I think that will be a milestone, but it won't erase all of the issues. We now have a black president. We still have huge issues for men and women of color. We need to see all of these populations, women's, minorities, represented in the seats of power at the same level that they're represented in the rest of the community. A female president is a good start. I hope we get there. But we also need women in our corporations.
Well, 2016 is coming up. Are we willing to get this going right now for you? Because I'm ready to go. How about you?
Not for me.
I'm debating in my head because this is such a, I've really liked that we've stayed on the Lean In topic, and I think that this is really why I invited you here. I have all these questions about Facebook, and I'll give you an opportunity to bring them up. But honestly, I think your message today is so powerful, and the energy in this room is so thick with this issue. I know it's at the top of everyone's mind that I really am loath to go into another category. You know, I want people to leave this room thinking about this. I want people to realize this is a critical issue for our future, and that the message that you bring, and also the message of someone like Petra Nemkova, the message of someone like Meg Whitman, the message of someone like Marissa, the message like someone like Sue Desmond-Hellmann, and the message of someone like Sheryl Sandberg is so important in today's world. And I just want to thank you so much for coming to Dreamforce, sharing the message, writing the book, and the incredible stories that you told. Sheryl Sandberg, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.